Hello and welcome back to another edition of Backcountry Trails, the Devil's Slide Trail to Tahquitz Peak in the Fire Lookout. In this edition, I introduce my nephew Ryder to the San Bernardino National Forest, and I lead him on a tough hike up the Devil's Slide Trail in the San Jacinto Mountains of Southern California. Way back in the late 1800s, during the hot summer months, the local ranchers would herd their cattle from the lower elevations in Garner Valley high up into the upper elevations of the nearby San Jacinto Mountains as a respite from the heat. Here at the higher elevations, the ample shade, the lush vegetation, and the cool breezes made for a more comfortable environment for their cattle. Garner Valley below is at an elevation of about 4,000 feet, with the upper elevations of the San Jacintos over 8,000 feet. At double the elevation, it was considerably cooler, and at times almost 20 degrees cooler. I don't know if you can tell, the sweat is just running down my face. I haven't even got a mile. Not even a mile. So while it was a sweltering 100 degrees in the valley below, it was only a mild 80 in the shady pines and the cool breezes near Saddle Junction at the top of Strawberry Valley. Getting the cattle up there, though, that was the tough part. The main route up to the cool pines was straight up the head of Strawberry Valley, where a creek flowed year-round from the snowmelt and the natural springs above. This more direct route was steep, rocky, slippery, and dangerous even for the cattle and the ranchers on horseback. As one cowboy once said, "This trail is so terrible, only the devil himself could have made this." And from that point on, it was called the Devil's Slide Trail. Our adventure begins at a small and rustic town below the famous Lily Rock, a source of native Indian lore in the town of Idlewild. Here, Ryder and I stopped briefly to fill out a wilderness permit form for a day hike up the Devil's Slide Trail. Permits are required here during the summer months, usually between Memorial Day and Labor Day, to limit erosion and overuse. They're free and self-issued at the San Jacinto District Ranger Station in town. All you gotta do is leave your name, your vehicle description, and your intended destination, and drop half the form in the box outside the ranger station and continue up Fern Valley to Humber Park, the official start of the Devil's Slide Trail. My goal was to do what they call an alpine start, that's before dawn, to give Ryder an opportunity to hike in the dark and experience the Mexican bats that roost in the cracks and crevices of Lily Rock that dart and dive around your headlamp chasing insects attracted to the light. I can say these birds keep flying right by my head in the middle of the night. What bird is up in the middle of the night? And then I got a pretty close-up view of one of them as it flew really close and hovered for a second. It's not a bird. It's a brown bat. So the bats are out this morning. They must have a little cave somewhere where they're flying in and out of looking for insects. There's a lot of moss flying around my headlamp when the headlamp is on. And I think that's what they're after. The moths are coming to the light. The bats are coming to the moths. All along the Devil's Slide Trail on the way up to the fire tower. Unfortunately, it gets light early in June, and by the time we got our packs and snacks and water ready for the hike, it was already light enough to navigate without them. The route up to Tahquitz Peak along the Devil's Slide Trail is a tough one, a steep climb of over 3,000 feet over 4.5 miles. Majority of the incline comes at the start of the hike, over 2,000 feet in the first 2.5 miles, making this one a rude awakening for sure. The steep trail, the large granite steps, and the relentless switchbacks get you second-guessing your decision to go on a hike today. We continued climbing steeply, stopping occasionally for me to catch my breath and to identify plants along the trail using the Seek Outside app on my phone. Here I took a photo of a leaf, a pine needle cluster, or a wildflower, and after a brief search, the app identified the type of flower, the needle or leaf, and gave a detailed description. This app I return to frequently as I hike to become more familiar with the local botany and continuing my education of basic woodsmanship in the forest. I showed Ryder what specific traits to look for while identifying pine trees. Are they 2 needles, 3, 4, or 5? And to estimate the length and the characteristics of these species. I also showed him traits of the tall but pine-like white fir, a relative of the Douglas fir, commonly used as Christmas trees during the holiday season. We also identified many other wildflowers such as the western columbine, the western wallflower, the Camp Martin paintbrush, as well as the more rare California black oak tree and the thimbleberry. As we climbed, the view over the now sun-drenched valley below was magnificent. The large granite rock formation across the valley is known as Suicide Rock, and it was once above us to our left when we first started up the trail, and now it was below us. After crossing several dry springs, we came upon what's known on the topographic map as Middle Spring. Now, since this has been a really dry winter, the precipitation levels, even in the mountains up here, were way less than expected, and several streams that normally flow with crisp, cold water were dry or reduced to a trickle. Fortunately, there was just enough water flowing over the moss-covered rocks for Ryder to fill up his smart water bottle and try out his Sawyer squeeze filter. Here I showed him how to filter water right from the source.
All right, well, we're at the spring. This is our water source for today. So Ryder's filling up his water bottle directly from the source into the smart water bottle, and then we're going to put a filter, a Sawyer squeeze filter, on the top of it, and that'll be his drinking water. All right, so you got that. So now you got to take that and screw it on top. And you'll see on the side of it, it'll show you the direction of travel of the water. So screw that on there nice and tight. There you go. So you'll have to squeeze because the water has to go filter. It has to filter through the filter. Now it tastes like regular drinking water, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, good morning, and welcome back out to another edition of Backcountry Trails. Today we're doing a hike up the Devil's Slide Trail, and we're going to be going up to Tahquitz Peak in the San Bernardino National Forest. There's a fire lookout up there that I normally work this time of year, but as of right now, the fire lookout is not open, so it'll all be closed when we get there. But in the meantime, we're going to enjoy our hike up this steep section of trail to get to Strawberry Junction, Saddle Junction, where we're going to take a break, make breakfast, take a break before continuing up south along the Pacific Crest Trail up to the side trail that goes to the top of Tahquitz Peak. So anyway, we got started right around dawn. Saw a couple of deer on the road on the way up here. Hopefully be a good hike. All right, well, we're working our way up the Devil's Slide Trail. We stopped for about 10 minutes at the spring back there, and we filtered some water. Got a quick little snack. Ryder popped the energy gel to help us. This section's a little tough. It's a little rocky as we're working our way up to Saddle Junction. When we reach Saddle Junction, we'll take a little break and make breakfast. Sun is coming up, starting to illuminate the valley behind us here, so gonna have some great views here in a couple minutes.
Off down a steep covered slope, a bright red stalk of color emerged from the pine needle floor of the forest. Here, a single snow plant reflected the soft morning light. Up ahead, more snow plants grew in small clusters. I stopped for a moment to tell Ryder about the rarely seen snow plants and told him how many people believe they're poisonous, but they are in fact edible if cooked properly.
Well, this is our first set of snow plants that we've seen up close on the trail. We did see some off in the distance, but this is a close-up view. Snow plants are not actually flowering plants. They're actually a fungus that grows in the leaf litter primarily underneath and along the roots of pine trees.
By the time we reached the top of the Devil's Slide Trail and the thick canopy of red-barked incense cedars, we began to look for a nice spot to set up for breakfast.
All right, well, we're almost to Saddle Junction. Saddle Junction's right in front of us. The sun is coming up from the west over Saddle Junction and working its way down the Devil's Slide Trail, which is where we are right now. So in a few minutes, we'll be at the junction. We'll be able to take a nice break and the pine trees and the cedars. We'll set up a little makeshift picnic area, and we'll have breakfast. Well deserved.
At what's known as Saddle Junction, there's a 5-way trail split. Here, trails head out to other destinations like San Jacinto Peak, Tahquitz Valley, Chinquapin Flats, and of course the big one, the Pacific Crest Trail that traverses the entire west coast of the United States, all 2,650 miles from the Mexican border all the way to Canada. After making a hard right, we headed up to the southbound Pacific Crest Trail, or known as the P.C.T., looking for a shady and flat spot to drop our packs. Within a few hundred yards, we ventured off trail to a small flat rock and took a well-needed break. Now, I had brought along several cook systems for our adventure today. I had packed an aluminum cook pot and a homemade stove made out of a cat food can and an energy drink bottle known affectionately as the Fancy Feast cat food stove for Ryder. Using an automobile gasoline de-icer for fuel, 1 ounce of this will boil 16 ounces of water in about 4 or 5 minutes. Ryder would light his stove using a ferrocerium rod and a striker. After a brief tutorial on how to use the ferro rod, Ryder successfully lit his stove and boiled his water for his dehydrated breakfast.
So Ryder's going to show you how to light your Fancy Feast stove. That's what they call it, a Fancy Feast stove, with the flint striker, with a ferrocerium rod and a striker. So why don't you go ahead and do that. You have to push hard. Kind of point it, like tilt it, point it that way.
Point it.
This way. So you're going to go like that.
Okay. Like that.
But you want it like that.
Oh, okay.
You got to get closer, and you got to push down hard. You got it. There you go. You did it. Put your hand over it.
Okay.
Is it going?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can feel
Okay.
heat.
So give it a second.
Okay, there it goes.
Now you can see the flame.
Uh-huh.
This is why you have the windscreen. See how it looks like your stove at home? It's
Yeah.
got a ring around it. Wrap. You can tell which way the wind's blowing from?
That way.
Okay, so wrap that around. Just be careful you don't get burned. Put your cup on there. And then you're going to put this over the top. Kind of mold it over the top. It's this tin foil. And then you can wrap that windscreen tighter around the little container.
Okay.
And you can bend in the end a little bit. That's good right there. Because it needs the oxygen to be able to breathe.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure you can. If you look down, you'll see the heat rising.
Uh-huh.
You see I can smell it. Can you smell it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the heat burning. So anyway, so that's going to take about 5 minutes to cook, to boil that water. So go ahead and open up your mountain house. There's a pull tab on it. It just rips right across the top. And then on the inside of that's a desiccant. So you want to pull that out. You don't want to eat that. So make sure you save that. And then you can kind of open that up and squish it to make it where it has a base. And then just, or you can zip the close, whatever you want to do. Just set it somewhere where you won't knock it over. That's the important part. You don't want to knock it over. So we're going to let that go. And then once it's at a rolling boil, we'll take it off.
A Mountain House Veggie Chorizo Breakfast Scramble. A mixture of eggs, potatoes, peppers, and a plant-based chorizo sausage. I had also brought a dehydrated meal for breakfast, a Peak brand breakfast skillet, and I heated it up using a military-style Trangia alcohol stove and a homemade canteen cup windscreen. While Ryder was boiling away, my stove went out several times before I reignited it. My canteen cup also slid off the windscreen and dumped my water right out into the dirt. Some expert I am, huh?
All right, so what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to use my old Trangia stove, but this is actually a canteen cup. I'm going to use the Trangia stove to heat up my water for my Peak breakfast skillet. Oops. Remember what I said about knocking stuff over? It's funny, it's lighting and it's going out. There it goes. I think it's going. Probably the wind doing it. Okay, it's going now finally. It's getting hot too. All right, it's balancing, it's barely on there. We'll see how it does. I gotta get my lid. Okay, the water is at a rolling boil. Remember, that flame is still going, and it's gonna go until it goes out. So you wanna make sure that you don't get anywhere near that foil. So let that sit there for a minute. Open up your mountain house. Okay, now you're gonna have to go get your spoon. And in the meantime, I'm gonna be cooking mine right there. I'm gonna be using my, my canteen cup stove. Okay, and then once you get your titanium spork out, you're going to want to hold on to your mountain house, and then carefully, using that buff to hold the edge of the pot, slowly pour that into your mountain house. So once you get all that water poured in, you can set your pot back down. And then stir up your mountain house really good. You want to make sure you go all the way to the bottom to get all the little powdered, mix in there. But because yours is a spork and not a spoon, be careful not to puncture the bottom of the bag or you'll leak your water out the bottom. So stir that up as good as you can. Do that for like about a minute maybe to make sure that everything is moist and wet. Is that good enough, you think? All right, so you can take your spoon out. I just lick it. You get a little taste of it. And then pick up your mountain house bag with both hands and slowly and carefully zip it back up. You want to squeeze the air out, but you don't want to squeeze too much or you'll squeeze all the contents right out the top. You feel it zip closed all the way?
Yep.
Okay, once it's zip closed, we can just set it aside. And on the side of the bag, it tells you how long it needs to sit. Probably 5 minutes, 9 minutes.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, and then does it say at 4 minutes, stir it, and then let it sit 4 more minutes?
Yeah, no. Let stand an additional 4 minutes, stir, and enjoy.
Okay, so it's only 4 minutes. That's not too bad. All right, it's a little cockeyed, but it's gonna work. All right, so I've got 1 cup of water, cooking on that. And oh, you're already digging in? How is it? It's really good. Okay, so anyway, so I gotta get mine to a rolling boil. And I gotta pour it in my Peak bag and let that sit.
As the water finally began to boil, I looked over at Ryder, who had already begun to chow down on his chorizo scramble. Must have been pretty good. After breakfast and a well-deserved rest stop, we picked up our packs and continued south on the Pacific Crest Trail under a canopy of tall cedars and sugar pines. Several large, fluffy tree squirrels ran across the trail in front of us and scampered up into the branches, barking at us. One squirrel carried a round mushroom and sat on a limb munching on his breakfast as we passed quietly underneath.
There's a large tree squirrel. He's got something in his mouth. He's eating a mushroom or something.
This section of trail, the southbound P.C.T., is undulating, meaning that it goes up and down in places, but nothing too difficult, just enough to take your breath away momentarily. We were over 8,000 feet in elevation now, and I could sure feel it, having to stop more frequently to catch my breath before continuing.
Well, we're working our way up to the top. We're not too far from the trail junction, the split, where P.C.T. continues southbound, and the trail up to Tahquitz Peak goes to the right. So we're getting there. We're probably, like I'm sure we're over 8,000 feet right now, and the altitude's kind of kicking my ass a little bit. I go about 50 feet and have to stop, catch my breath. Ryder's motoring through it all. No problems whatsoever, so we're getting there.
As we neared our side trail toward Tahquitz Peak, we came across an older gentleman moving swiftly, carrying a very light backpack. We stopped to chat a bit, and he told us he was through hiking the P.C.T., or hiking all 2,650 miles from Mexico to Canada. West along the P.C.T., we took the Tahquitz Peak Trail to the lookout. Now, this section of trail, nearest the peak, was sometimes dangerous. In the winter months, and usually into the spring, the northeast face slopes along Tahquitz Peak were snow-laden and iced up. While normally not too big of a problem for the more well-experienced hikers, the steep 3,000-foot drop down to the valley below can be fatal. And just a few months ago, 2 inexperienced hikers fell over 800 feet and had to be rescued by a helicopter, and both suffered some serious injuries.
Top of the yellow. Watch for drift. 3, 2, 1, touchdown. Roger. Clear for left or right pedal turn. Look is clear of all obstacles.
Another concern, especially in the warmer months, are the southern Pacific rattlesnakes that live in amongst the rocks, clinging tightly to the trail where you step. Now, I have personally encountered several large venomous rattlesnakes along this section and told Ryder to be especially vigilant where he stepped and to listen for the telltale rattles. On one occasion, right near the top of the trail, I encountered this bad boy tucked under an overhanging rock.
Okay, that scared the shit out of me. Just walking right by the trail. You can see my trail right there. And there's a southern Pacific rattlesnake right there. Holy shit. Yeah, didn't even see him. The only thing I saw was his tongue. That's what caught my attention. Wow. Doesn't look real big, but he's coiled. He's ready. So, not getting any closer. Okay, go away, little buddy. Yeah, he's pretty good size. Look at those rattles. He doesn't really even rattle.
National Geographic did a study and produced a special on the San Jacinto Southern Pacific rattlesnake just a few years ago, as this species of rattlesnake has both hemotoxic and neurotoxic venom, making them especially dangerous. One of my fellow lookout volunteers had a near tragic encounter with the San Jacinto rattlesnake as his dog was bitten, but thankfully survived. We eventually arrived at the summit of Tahquitz Peak in the Auto Service Lookout Tower. It was a shame to see the old girl all boarded up for the season, even though by now it's usually open and staffed. In fact, I was actually scheduled to work up here today. Ryder and I admired the tremendous view, and I pointed out distant peaks as far away as 50 miles. Even though it was rather hazy, the view was still amazing. We could see the edge of the Salton Sea, Diamond Valley Reservoir, Lake Skinner, and the edge of Vail Lake. The Hale telescope, once the world's largest, was visible on top Mount Palomar. We also ran into several other hikers who had made the summit, and I told them about the history of the Tahquitz Peak Fire Lookout and surrounding hikes that they should try maybe next time they're up this way. Now, Ryder and I relaxed on the deck of the Fire Lookout with our legs dangling over the edge, feet swinging in the cool breeze, and we enjoyed our time together on Tahquitz Peak, eating some snacks. Before we left, we walked out to the furthest slab of rock overlooking the valley below. Ryder nervously stepped out to the ledge, and we took a few photos of the view almost 5,000 feet below before gathering our packs and starting back down the trail.
All right, we got to get right here. Are you afraid of heights? Okay, well, you can stand right there then. You should be good right there. I'll stand right here. You can see they had rocks. They used to have a plaque up here. Well, we made it out here toward the top of Tahquitz Peak up here in the San Bernardino National Forest. We're at an elevation of 8,837 feet right here. This tower was built in the 1930s. It's one of the highest fire lookout towers anywhere in the national forest that's still within a wilderness. So as you can see, it's been a gorgeous day today. It's a little hazy, but other than that, it's been a great hike on the way up here. Tough hike, but a good hike. It's been about 4.5 miles up the Devil's Slide Trail from Humber Park to here. So we got about 4.5 miles to head back down to get back down to the Jeep and some cold refreshments and an ice chest in the back. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Backcountry Trails, our adventure up here to Tahquitz Peak in the San Bernardino National Forest. Don't forget to hit that click and subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post a link down below. Alrighty, take care. Bye-bye.
The trail back went fast, and even though it was in the hot noonday sun, it was much easier than hiking uphill. We did look for rattlesnakes under every overhanging rock, but we didn't see any today. We ran into several hikers, 2 of which were hiking with a dog, who told us that the hikers just ahead of us that were actually down the trail told them they had run into 2 on the way. Unfortunately, we didn't see any today. We arrived back at the trail around 2:30 in the afternoon and enjoyed an ice-cold beverage from the ice chest in the Jeep and drove home. This was a fun hike and a chance to show Ryder why I love the outdoors so much. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about proper hydration, water filtration, trail courtesy, plant identification, and the leave no trace ethics so important along a busy trail like the Devil's Slide Trail. Even if he doesn't remember everything I taught him today, which I highly doubt because I told him a lot and I'm sure it was overwhelming, I hope he enjoyed his time up in the San Jacinto Mountains and spending time with his old uncle. I told him when he gets home, he's either never going to go hiking again or he'll start looking up trails near the house. Hopefully I sparked an interest in the outdoors that'll lead to more exciting adventures. Well, that'll do it for this edition of Backcountry Trail, Ryder's trip up the Devil's Slide Trail to the top of Tahquitz Peak to see the fire lookout. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other edition of Backcountry Trails, post a note on the webpage. Once again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you down the trail. Bye-bye.